Imagine being told you would earn $14,000 for a simple medical procedure, only to find yourself trapped in a fortified compound with 100 other women, your passport confiscated, your body used as a human egg farm. This isn't the plot of a dystopian novel. It's the reality that was uncovered in Georgia just weeks ago. As investigators peeled back the layers of this operation, they uncovered a sophisticated network run by Chinese gangsters who had perfected a system of exploitation. What makes this case particularly disturbing isn't just the physical imprisonment, it's the psychological tactics used to keep women compliant while their bodies were harvested month after month. Today, let's delve into the Thai human egg farm case in Georgia. February 2025. It's a cold morning, the kind that bites at your skin. But today, the chill isn't just in the air. It's in the urgency of the voices buzzing inside the Pavena Foundation's office. A phone call had just come in, a woman's voice shaky but determined. She says, "My name is Na. Please, you have to help us." Her words spill out, desperate and raw. She tells them about the nightmare she has gone through, about the 100 other women who are still trapped, about how for months they've been prisoners in a place they thought would give them hope. It all started so simply, a Facebook ad, a chance to be a surrogate mother in Georgia, paid travel, free accommodation, a paycheck that could change their lives. It sounded too good to pass up, and so Na applied. She wasn't alone. Other young women, just like her, filled out forms, did their research. They wanted to be sure. And everything checked out, or so they thought. The flight to Tbilisi was quiet. Nervous excitement filled the cabin. They were about to start new jobs, new lives. But the second they landed, reality twisted into something else. Their passports were taken. No explanations, just a simple, quiet act that sealed their fate. Na was taken to a house. 30 other Thai women were already there. At first, they whispered to each other, trying to make sense of it all. Where were the doctors? Where were the families they were supposed to help? Where were the contracts they had been promised? The next day, she was moved to a different house, a smaller one. 10 more women, just like her, eyes wide with fear. And then the truth came out. There were no babies, no surrogacy. Instead, they were being used for something else, their eggs. One by one, they were taken into rooms. No choice, no consent. The procedures were frequent, painful. Na could still feel it in her bones, the exhaustion, the dizziness. Some of the women were getting sick, too many procedures, too fast. But no one cared. They weren't seen as people anymore. She started noticing the men. They came and went, speaking in hushed voices. Chinese men. They weren't doctors. They weren't future parents. They were something else. And suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't a job. It was a trafficking ring, a cold, calculated business turning women's bodies into a commodity. Na had to do something. She had to get out. And then she got her chance. When Na escaped and landed back in Thailand in September 2024, her body was weak, drained by the relentless hormone treatments that had been forced upon her. But her mind was clear. She hadn't survived this to stay silent. The moment she touched down, Na immediately contacted the Pavena Foundation for Children and Women. And this is how the shocking truth slowly began to unravel. What would make nearly 100 women leave their homes, their families, and everything they've ever known and travel to a country they've never set foot in? The answer isn't simple. It's not desperation alone. It's deception, meticulously crafted, surgically precise. And it all started with a Facebook ad. Not just any ad, a perfect ad. It didn't scream scam or shady opportunity. It looked real, polished, professional, full of promise. A legal surrogacy job in Georgia, free travel, luxury accommodations, and most importantly, a life-changing payout, 400,000 to 600,000 baht. That's around 14,000 US dollars. In Thailand, that's more than most people make in years. And here's where it gets sinister. The traffickers knew their target audience, young women struggling to make ends meet, women who wanted a fresh start, who needed financial security, women like Na. But flashing big numbers isn't enough to get someone to uproot their life. The traffickers played the long game. They built credibility. The traffickers anticipated every doubt. They had answers to everything. The operation even had a digital footprint, fake testimonials, staged success stories, smiling women who supposedly went, earned their money, and returned home happier than ever. So, like many others, Na did her research. She checked. It looked legitimate. And she wasn't alone. Hundreds of women applied. Hundreds were accepted. And within weeks, plane tickets were booked. At the airport, everything still felt normal. The traffickers even handed each woman $500 in cash. Show this to immigration, they were told. It will make things smoother. And it worked. Thai immigration let them through. Georgian immigration let them in. And just like that, they were in, locked in. If you were walking past the houses in Galdani, a quiet district in northeastern Tbilisi, you wouldn't think twice. They looked like any other homes, ordinary, normal. But inside, nearly 100 women were trapped. When Na arrived, she was taken straight from the airport to one of the houses. And that is when reality hit. The first thing they did was they took her passport. That's how the traffickers stripped them of their first layer of freedom. No passport meant no way to leave, no way to prove who they were, no way to escape. Then came the second layer of control, fear. You're here illegally now, they told her. If you try to run, the police will arrest you. And it was a lie. But when you're in a foreign country, when you don't speak the language, when the only people around you say the same thing over and over, you believe it. By the time she realized the truth, she was already trapped. Na was taken to one of the houses, and inside she saw them, 60 women crammed into a single space. She barely had time to take it all in before she was moved again. This time to a smaller house, new faces, more women. The constant relocation was random. It was tactical. If the women couldn't form close bonds, they couldn't organize an escape. If they didn't know where they were, they couldn't navigate their way out. If they were confused, isolated, and exhausted, they wouldn't fight back. And it worked. Days passed, then weeks. Then came the final realization, the most horrifying one of all. Leaving wasn't free. The traffickers made sure of that. If you want to leave, you can, they said, but it will cost you 50,000 to 70,000 baht. That's between 1,200 to 1,600 US dollars, more than what many of these women had ever saved in their entire lives. How were they supposed to pay? They had no jobs, no access to money, no phones, no outside help. Behind those ordinary walls, these women weren't just prisoners. They weren't just victims. They were factories. To the traffickers, they weren't human beings with dreams, fears, or families. They were walking, breathing resources, bodies to be drained for profit. In a real medical setting, egg donation is a carefully monitored process. Women are screened, informed of the risks, and given medical support every step of the way. But in this compound, none of that existed. Here's how it worked. First, the women were pumped full of hormonal injections, not to help them, but to force their bodies to overproduce eggs. Normally, a woman releases 1 egg per cycle. These drugs made their ovaries hyperstimulate, producing many more eggs at once. In a hospital, doctors would monitor this process closely with blood tests and ultrasounds to make sure nothing went wrong. But here, there was no monitoring, no safety checks, no concern for side effects. Just injection after injection, like a factory processing its next batch. Then came the harvesting. One by one, the women were put under anesthesia. When they woke up, their eggs were gone. No explanations, no consent forms, no follow-up care. They didn't even know where their eggs had gone or who would be using them. And the risks they faced was deadly. When a woman's body is overstimulated like this, things can go horribly wrong. Ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome occurs when the ovaries swell dangerously, fluid fills the abdomen, and in severe cases, kidney failure and blood clots can lead to death. Overstimulation can also result in internal bleeding from rushed, unsafe procedures, pelvic infections that cause lifelong health problems, or worse. Chronic pain, nausea, and dizziness may also occur as side effects of being forced through this process again and again. In real hospitals, doctors stop the procedure if there's a risk of OHSS. They treat infections before they become fatal. But here, no one cared. The women were processed like livestock, and the cycle never stopped. Na remembered seeing it in their faces. Some women were gaunt and pale, their bodies exhausted from constant harvesting. Others were bloated and in pain, their stomachs swollen from the drugs forced into them. Many felt constantly sick and weak, their bodies breaking down while the traffickers kept demanding more. The eggs weren't just taken, they were sold. The traffickers had found a way to tap into the global fertility market without following a single ethical rule. One egg from a healthy young donor can sell for thousands of dollars in places like the US, Europe, or China. A single woman can produce multiple eggs per cycle. Multiply that by 100 women being forced through this process every single month, the numbers become staggering. This wasn't just human trafficking, this was an industry. A business worth millions built on the suffering of women who had no idea what was happening to their bodies. And why Georgia? Because the laws weren't clear. Georgia had become a hub for commercial surrogacy, drawing international clients looking for egg donors and surrogate mothers. Now, in the wake of this case, the Georgian government is scrambling to ban commercial surrogacy altogether. But this case exposes the dangerous gap between emerging medical technologies and the legal frameworks meant to govern them. And for these women, the damage is already done. But maybe the most disturbing part is the way they twisted something so deeply human into something monstrous. Egg donation, when done ethically, is about hope, a chance to help another family have a child. But here, there was no choice, no consent, just women trapped in a nightmare, their bodies used, their pain ignored. And the families who ended up with these eggs, they may never know the dark truth behind the life they longed for. Na's journey to freedom started with a desperate call. She begged her family to send the ransom money her captors demanded. It wasn't just a financial burden, it was a life-altering sacrifice, months' worth of income drained in an instant. But it worked. In September 2024, Na was released. She boarded a plane back to Thailand. The moment she got home, Na didn't waste a second. She went straight to the Pavena Foundation for Children and Women, a respected Thai NGO known for fighting human trafficking. But even with her first-hand account, she faced a brutal reality. Her story sounded too horrific to be real. When we first heard her story, we had so many questions, a foundation representative later admitted. The scale of the operation she described, it was almost unbelievable. And that was the problem. International trafficking cases are incredibly hard to prove. False claims can derail entire investigations. But Na didn't back down. She told them everything, every detail of the compound, the forced procedures, the missing passports. The foundation started digging. Piece by piece, they put together the puzzle. They cross-referenced missing persons reports. They reached out to families of women who had traveled to Georgia for so-called surrogacy work. They used Na's descriptions to pinpoint the compound's exact location, and soon a terrifying pattern emerged. With mounting evidence, they took the case to Thai authorities. It landed on the desk of Police Major General Surapan Thaiprasert of the Royal Thai Police. He knew right away this wasn't just any other trafficking case. This was something bigger, something global. So he reached out to Interpol, he reached out to Georgian authorities, and together they started planning a rescue mission unlike anything before. But this wasn't going to be easy. First, they had to confirm the compound's exact location in Georgia's Goldani district. Then, they needed hard evidence, something strong enough to convince the Georgian government to act. And most importantly, they had to find a way to extract the women safely. If the traffickers got wind of the investigation, they could shut down everything, move the operation overnight, and just disappear. So for months, this delicate international operation played out behind closed doors. Then on January 30th, 2025, the moment came. A coordinated raid was launched, and finally, 3 Thai women who had secretly reached out for help were pulled from the compound. But here's where things got complicated. When investigators started interviewing the other women at the facility, they didn't all describe the same nightmare Na had escaped from. In fact, some insisted they were there voluntarily. "We are not prisoners," one woman called Nara told investigators. "We have our passports, we can leave whenever we want." She even showed what appeared to be a legitimate contract with a company called Chinese Baby Cam Medical Consulting Group, LLC. According to her, the women were paid $300 to $500 a month, and once they gave birth, they would receive around $11,000. Then came Li Yuan, a baby cam representative in Georgia. She denied everything. No trafficking, no forced procedures, no confiscated passports. These women are compensated. Nobody is forced to stay here. The contradiction threw the investigation into chaos. If some women were being trafficked, why were others defending the facility? Could it be fear, psychological manipulation, or was there a hierarchy where some women got better treatment while others were trapped in something much darker? Thai and Georgian authorities conducted over 70 interviews, but in the end, apart from the 3 Thai women who had begged for rescue, no other formal complaints were registered against the facility. Yet, something still wasn't adding up. Maybe some of these women believed they had a choice, but when you're trapped in economic desperation, when your only way out is to sell a piece of yourself, is that really consent? Adding to the complexity, we have another voice in the conversation. Anastasia, a Kazakh woman who had gone to Georgia as a surrogate mother. She described the ugly side of surrogacy, saying she was treated as nothing more than a womb. She had to fight to get paid, was threatened, and in the end, her payment was nothing more than a promise written on a piece of paper, not even a proper legal contract. On the other hand, Lika Chkonia, the head of the Georgian Association of Reproductive Medicine and Embryology, firmly defended the surrogacy industry. She argued that legitimate clinics follow ethical guidelines and make sure that foreign women fully understand their contracts before agreeing to anything. She also insisted that any wrongdoing would be investigated. So where does this leave us? Despite the conflicting testimonies, one thing was certain. The raid had cracked open a story the world couldn't ignore. News outlets across Asia and Europe picked it up, calling it the egg mafia, the egg trafficking ring. Suddenly, people were paying attention. This case is far from over. Some believe that the Thai women's accounts prove that surrogacy needs stricter regulations, that too many women are being exploited in a system with too many loopholes. Others argue that dissatisfaction or misunderstandings could be behind some of these complaints. After all, surrogacy is complicated. Not every experience is going to be the same. But whatever the truth is, these allegations could have serious consequences, possibly changing surrogacy laws across Europe, especially in Georgia. For now, all we can do is wait for more updates and let the investigation run its course. This issue exposed a harsh, uncomfortable truth: how easily vulnerable women can become commodities in the unregulated global fertility market. There's supposed to be safeguards. The Verona Principles, for example, emphasize that surrogate mothers should give fully informed, voluntary consent before undergoing any procedure. But what does consent even mean when desperation is involved? If a woman is struggling to feed her family, if she has no other way to survive, is her yes truly voluntary, or is it coerced by circumstances she never chose? Without strong legal protections, cases like this will keep happening. Traffickers will keep exploiting loopholes, operating in gray zones where laws don't reach and ethics don't matter. But whose job is it to regulate this? Should governments step in and create strict laws against commercial surrogacy? Or would that push the industry even deeper underground, making it even harder to protect women trapped in these systems? For the survivors, the road to recovery is anything but easy. The Pavena Foundation and other organizations are stepping in, offering psychological support and legal help to piece their lives back together. But support can only go so far when the damage has already been done. How do you rebuild after something like this? And what about the women still inside, the ones who didn't or couldn't ask for rescue? If they tell authorities they're choosing to stay, can we ever really know if they're speaking freely? Or are they simply too afraid, too manipulated, or too financially dependent to say otherwise? Societies can start questioning the idea that women's bodies should ever be for sale, no matter how sophisticated the transaction appears. Because if nothing changes, more women will be trapped, more lives will be sold, harvested, and discarded. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.